That mean we're ready to go? Okie dokie. Have you ever wondered if other families go through as much stress getting ready for service on the weekend? Do you ever think that maybe you are a hypocrite because the minute the alarm goes off, the fussing and arguing begins, but everyone is all smiles when they get there? Well, you are the only one that has ever experienced that. We are all perfect. The sun comes up gently through our windows, and we all wake up to the birds singing and the sweet smell of flowers just outside our doors. Yeah, whatever. All right. Have you ever wondered why your family always seems to tear down everything you try to do in your service to God? Why do they bring up every failure and sin in your life every time you mention God? Do you ever wonder if you will ever get over your feelings of inadequacy? Do you ever wonder if you will ever measure up? Do you wonder if you will ever be pleasing to God? The name of this message is Just Right for God. Please stand and cover yourselves for the reading of our scripture today. Our scripture comes from Meshalim, that's Proverbs 25:16, which says, Devash matzata hol dayaha pen tisba'enu vaha keto. All right, you may be seated. We begin with Devash. Devash is honey. It's that stuff that bumblebugs make. Yeah, the sweet stuff. Then it says Matzata, which is found. It's to come to attain to arrive at something. So, not exactly the word I think of in founding. I think of all, which is to put something on top of another, to build something on a foundation. But this is like more like find, but you come to the conclusion. Something brings you to that conclusion. That's followed by ehol, which is eat. It's to eat, to devour, to put food in the mouth, chew on it, and swallow it. Just what you think of, to eat. It's an odd Hebrew sentence given that there's so many nouns in it. But then it's followed up with dayaha, which is sufficient. It's something that's large enough. It's a large enough quantity. They say to be many, but it's to have enough. What is sufficient for someone? So it's the right amount of something. So in this case, we're talking about eating. So obviously, it's the right amount of food. Then it says pen. Pen is a Hebrew word that we use in English. We say lest. When it just means less. So let's drive them out of the garden lest they eat from the other tree, right? That kind of a thing. And it's lest, and then it's tis ba'enu, which is lest we are filled. It's to become satisfied. They say to become satiated. It's to be full. You've eaten enough and you're done. The primary idea lies in abundance of drink. You drink it down until you don't want no more. You're satisfied. Then our last word is vahakato, which literally is and vomit. And we all know what that is. So here's the translation. You have attained honey. Or should I say, have you attained honey? Question mark. Eat a suitable amount, lest you overdo it and vomit. You realize this is Meshalim, right? It's a proverb. It's an enigma. Have you attained honey? Do you have something that's sweet in your life? Only consume the right amount, because if you overdo it, you're going to spit it up, right? Modesty in all things, maybe? Let's think about something from the Sepharim Shelihim, the New Testament letters. I'm going to turn to Levi or Matthew chapter 10:34. The first word in Greek is May, like the month of May, but it's spelled M-E-I, not M-A-Y. Anyway, it's no, it's not. It's the negative article. And then it's in Greek, it's nomisete, which is used in place of hasav in Hebrew. It's to think, to meditate. The primary idea is that of computing and reckoning. You meditate on something and then you come to this idea, and that's what you have reckoned from that computing, from that meditating. That's followed by OT, which is, we use the word in Hebrew, asher. It means that or which. And then they say a tone, ale tone. Don't know why I can't say that. Ale tone, which we say bo in Hebrew. It's to come, to enter, to return. Yes, in Hebrew, the same word for come is the same word for go, the same word for went, the same word for arrive. It's all the same thing, because wherever you go, there you are. And when you get there, you have arrived there because you went there. Because at some point you you go. It's all the same thing, right? We have to have different words in English, but in Hebrew they don't. It's the same word. So then it's balein in Greek, which we use the Hebrew word tul, which is sin. It's to throw down at length, to cast as a spear, to cast out as from a country, from a ship. You know, you cast off on a ship, right? To send forth by the wind. You put the sail up and you move forward. So it's to send something, to cast off. You got it? And then in Greek, the next word is erenein, which we use the word shalom. You guys know what that means. It's to be whole, it's to be entire, it's to be healthy, it's to be sound, secure, tranquil. It's of wholeness and safety. It's from the root shalom, which is where they get the word Salem, because when you're transliterating the word shalom into Greek or English, or Greek particular in this case, and you don't have the SH sound, you just leave the H out, and what do you get? Salam or Salem. That is the word. Which it's the same thing, though. It's to be sound, but it's to be complete. It's to be finished. And so the thing that gets lost in the Western world in the word shalom is that when you take on the yoke of God, which is the Torah, and by the way, the very first letter of the Hebrew alphabet in Paleo Hebrew, in the original Hebrew, the first letter was not an ox. It was an ox yoke. And since an ox yoke in those days basically looked like the skeleton of an ox, all you had to do was draw two little polka dots for the eyes and maybe a little thing for the nose, and you took an ox yoke and made it into an ox. You see what happened? That's exactly what happened. Somebody looked at it and said, well, that looks like an ox. Well, yeah, but it's actually a yoke. So you take God's yoke upon you. And then when you get to the last letter of the Hebrew alphabet in Paleo, it looks just like the cross that the Christians use to put their crucifix. It's the Jesus hanging on thing, the T. That's what the last letter of the original Hebrew alphabet looked like. And it was the sign of covenant. It was the sign that they put on a covenant when it was brought to completion. So you take on the Torah and you learn it. You know, when you take it on, you don't know anything about it. But then as you go through time and learn it and live it and work it and live it out in your life, and get to that place where you don't have to look it up every time you turn around, because you've just, it's become part of your life, then you've reached the point where they put the cross, the sign of the cross over you. By the way, that background thing that we used to have that everybody thought was a cross with an upside down A on it, that's the Aleph and the Tav, the beginning and the end, the first and the last, the first letter of the Paleo Hebrew alphabet and the last, the yoke of God that ends up with the sign of covenant at the end, the Aleph and the Tav. That's what Shalom is. It's to begin your journey by taking on the yoke of God, by taking on that burden of learning it and living it and learning to love it. And then when you get there at the end of it, you get the cross. It always will lead you to the cross, and the cross is a sign of a completed covenant. And that's what shalom is. It's the being on the other side. It's to be finished, to be complete, to be whole. And our God is faithful and just. And we know that the good work that he began in us by putting the yoke on us, he will see it through to completion, the tav. Anyway, the next word in Greek was epi. And this is the word we use in Hebrew of all. And I mentioned it earlier. It's on. It's upon something. It's an upper part of another thing. So you pour a foundation, you build something on it. This is the word I think of when I say found, because I wasn't thinking in terms of finds. And the first word was find, and then in that when I mentioned it earlier, this one is not. This is a foundation. So then they have tain, which in Hebrew it's not a word. It's just a sound. They say ha usually. And it's the definite article in this case. And then they say gain, which is the Greek word for land or earth. So we say aretz in Hebrew, or eretz. Makes no difference. It's the same word. And then it's lo, so now, or uk, which is the negative article, so we say lo. Then they say el tone, so there's your bow, your come, go, arrive, went, all of those things. Then again they say balein, which is toll, that's to send, to throw, to cast off on a ship. And then again they say shalom, to be whole, to be complete, to be finished. And then it says Allah, which is not the name uh, of the pagan god, but it's the Greek word for, it's a conjunction. It's but. It's Yeshua said to live by the law, but we live by grace. Yeah, it's that word. Maheron, which is, yeah, they do have sound in Greek. It means, if we say cherev in uh, Hebrew, and it means sword. It's a sword, as laying waste others, as having the signification of edge, to be sharp, acrid, whence edge of a sword. It's what you think of. It's a sword. It's that thing you pull out of the sheath and poke somebody with. It's applied to other cutting instruments as well, though, and this is important. It's used of a circumcising knife, of just a regular knife, of a graving tool. Although I think I would pass out if I was going to be circumcised and they pulled out a long sword. But it's the same word though. It's because it really just it's talking. The word itself gives the image of a blade, and so whether it's a long sword or a small knife or some kind of graving tool, it's still a blade. So you have to think of it in those terms. So a circumcising knife, they use that in Romans chapter 2:29. It says, and circumcision is that of the heart, in the spirit, and not in the letter, whose praise is not of men, but of God. Which is not to say that physical circumcision has been replaced by the spirit. That's Christian doctrine. I know that. But that's not what they're saying. They're saying that the physical circumcision is done because of the law, because of the letter. That's why it's done. But it doesn't mean anything if your heart isn't circumcised. And if your heart's not circumcised, if your heart's not right with God, then circumcision, according to the letter, is nothing more than a medical procedure. Anyway, two-edged sword is used in Hebrews 4:12. It's for the word of God is quick and powerful and sharper than any two-edged sword, piercing even to the dividing asunder of soul and spirit and of joints and marrow, and is a discerner of the thoughts and the intents of the heart. And then graving tool is also used in Hebrews. It's in 10:16. This is the covenant that I will make with them after those days, says Yahweh. I will put my Torah into their hearts, and in their minds will I write it. So you have the covenant will I make after those days. So the sword that has to kill the animal for the covenant is being used. I will put my Torah into their heart, and in their minds I will write it. So there's your graving blade. You have two of them in this one. Here's my amplified translation, which doesn't make a lot of sense, of course, but I'll give you the regular one after. It's, remember, we're at Levi or Matthew chapter 10, verse 34. Don't meditate, reckon, or think that I came or that I come to throw down and cast out peace, soundness, and tranquility on the earth. I did not come to throw down and cast out peace, soundness, and tranquility, but a sword. So here's the regular translation. Do not think that I've come to pour out peace upon the earth. I did not come to pour out peace, but a sword. And this is the Mashiach. This is Yeshua saying, I didn't come to give everybody peace. I came to bring a sword. A sword that will circumcise your heart. A two-edged sword that will pierce and divide the soul and spirit, the joint and marrow, the thoughts and the intents of the heart. A graving tool that will write his word on our hearts and engrave them in our minds. Do you get it? Now, in the next verse, Levi or Matthew chapter 10, verse 35, now in the King James it says, For I am come to set a man at variance against his father, and the daughter against the mother, and the daughter-in-law against the mother-in-law. Well, the word that I think is important here is dihasai in Greek. It's used, we use, in Hebrew we say parat, which is separate, separate, to break off, to break in pieces, to separate by breaking, dispersing, letting up, breaking forth, expanding, to expand. In other words, like wings to fly, they're expanded, to flee away, to scatter. So here's the regular translation of that, my translation of the Greek text. For I am come, now he's already said he didn't come to bring peace but a sword. Then he says, For I am come to turn man against his father, and daughter against her mother, and the daughter-in-law against her mother-in-law. I mean, this doesn't even say, really? The Mashiach would come to do that? Well, his sword will take you away from your family. His sword will give you wings to fly. His sword will disperse your family. Yeshua, Jesus, did not come to make your family life groovy like the Brady Bunch. Next verse, Levi or Matthew 10:36. In the King James, it said, A man's foes shall be they of his own household. Well, I want to go through this one a little more in depth than the last one. I'm going to go through all the words. Troi is your first Greek word. It's used, we use oyeb or for enemy. It's where you get the word Job. This is the word. To be an adversary to anyone, to persecute him as an enemy, to hate. The original idea is of breathing, blowing, puffing, and the idea often applied to anger and hatred. Why would they do that? What was that got to do with it? Well, when you're angry or you're displaying your hatred and and you're all angry and ragey, you're breathing hard, and from that hard breathing, your nostrils are moving in and out. That's the picture that you should see here in this word. Oh, and I thought I was going to go through the whole verse, but I guess that was at the time I was doing this the only thing I thought important. So here's my translation of the Greek: and a man's enemies in his household. In other words, his enemies are in his household. Your family will tear you down. They will make fun of your beliefs. They will make you feel ashamed of who you are. Their words are your enemy, and their words are God's enemy. They're not. Their words and their actions. His sword will separate you from your family and your enemy within it. How? Well, he will give you the power to endure the attack. He will give you the power to overcome the wounds. He will heal your scars, and you will one day be able to stand tall before your family and their words and their actions. It's not that he's separating you from the people, he's separating you from the evil. Verse 37. The first word is O in Greek, it's who in Hebrew, and it just means he or it. And then it's philon, which philos, you hear it, love. So in Hebrew, of course, it's ahav. It's to desire, to breathe after anyone, the signification of breathing after, hence of longing. To love, to breathe after. Okay, what are they saying? Well, they're talking about the word itself, ahav, is really not a word. We say ahav, but it's really not a word. It's a sound. That's how you actually pronounce that word in Hebrew. It's a breathing sound. The more intense the breathing, the more intense the love. That's as clear as I'm going to make that. Then the word is patera. And some of you should recognize that. Not pater. That's patros. You heard that before? Father. So we say Av. And since in this case it's his father, it's Avi, his father. All right, let's see. The next important thing is emo or ima, mother. And then we have uper in Greek, then it's which is yoter. It's more. It's to be redundant, to abound, to be over and above. The picture that they use in Hebrew for this word is when you tie a knot. It's of that extra. When you tie a knot, there's extra rope or string or whatever you tie the knot in. There's that leftover that will never be used for anything else. It's just leftover. It's just an abundance beyond and above what you needed, right? That's what they're saying. Mimani is your next word. It's a part taken from the whole, so you got to connect the two to get the same idea here. Then it's in me in Greek, which means it's used for the words me, myself, and I in English. We say li in Hebrew. And it's followed by uk estin, which is einenu, which means it is not, it is nothing, it's of emptiness, it doesn't amount to anything. Then we follow that in Greek with azios, which is, we say in Hebrew, kedai, it's worthy, sufficiency, a large enough quantity to be many, to be, we already had the word. It's from the root daya, which is to be much, to be sufficient. It's, you're filled, you got everything you need. Then they say Mao in Greek, which is another way to say Li in Hebrew, or me, myself, and I in English. That's got a conjunction following that. And then they use the word philon again, the word for love, the breathing after and all of that. And then it says huion, which is seed, children, son. So we say Beno for his son. And then it's got a conjunction after that. And then it says in Greek, to gatera, which is bought, or in this case, vito, which is the same word, but it's his daughter. And then we have yoter, which is the redundant, the leftover, the string, the leftover on it. Mimene, which is connected to that same idea. And then we have again, it's me or li, me, myself, and I. And then it says uk estin, which is not. Then we have axios. We've had that already. It's kede. So it's the sufficiency, the adequacy to be filled. And then we have the me, myself, and I word again. So what all that adds up to, here's my amplified version. He that desires, breathes after, is inclined to, delights in, and longs for father and mother, from an exceeding measure above and beyond me, this is Messiah talking, is empty and void, not adequate enough for me. And he that desires, breathes after, is inclined to, delights in, and longs for son and daughter, from an exceeding measure above and beyond me, Messiah, is empty and void, not sufficient for me. The me in this case is Messiah, right? So here's a regular translation, because that doesn't make any sense. He that loves father or mother more than Mashiach is not worthy of Mashiach. And he that loves sons or daughters more than Mashiach is not worthy of Mashiach. And in verse 38, it starts off in Greek kai, which is for Hebrew, it's the vav, it's the conjunction. And then we have who, which is he or it. But then we have a new word, lambane, it's to take. And it's yikach in Hebrew, it's to take, to stick together, to adhere. It's like glue. You put two things, you glue two things together, they adhere together to take for oneself. It's the word used in Hebrew to take a wife. And then they have the negative article after that, and then they have the word for it or he, and they're talking here about the cross. He's got to take up the cross. So because it's written the way it is, it's not saying his cross, it's saying this cross. And that's really important that you understand not his cross, but this cross. Then it's stauron, sorry, in Greek, which is tala in Hebrew, which is cross. So it's saying this cross, not his cross. He who takes up his cross, it's he who takes up this cross, this crucifixion. So then there's a vav, a conjunction after that, and then it says in Greek, akolautai, or te rather, which is we use the word halach, which is to go along, to follow. It's of boundaries, and that's really important of boundaries. It is to go through and over a place. It's of a well-worn path. To go, and they said the boundaries, because if you're on the path, staying on the path gives you boundaries, right? You're not going off this way, meandering around and through there and over here. You stay on the path because that's your boundary. To walk after, it's used of worshiping someone. It's following after their manner of life. It's following their footsteps. It's being just like them. That's what that walk is all about. And so then that's followed by opiso, which is a Greek word. In Hebrew we say ahar, and it means after. It's what's behind. It's the hinder part. It's an extremity. Hence to place behind or in the background. Of place, behind, after, of time. It's after this, after that. You get it. Then they use the word for me, myself, and I, and then they say the word for is not, the two words, the estin in Greek, enenu, which is not in Hebrew. Oxios, we've already had that. It's kadai, it's the sufficiency to have enough. And then it says, me, myself, and I. You know the word for that. So here's the Amplified Translation. And he that does not take for himself, stick together and adhere to this crucifixion. In other words, this sacrifice. And walk within these boundaries on this path, imitating this manner of life, following behind me, this Mashiach, calling himself me, is empty and void, not adequate enough for me, the Mashiach. So here's my translation of the Greek. And he who does not live by the Torah, because it's in the Hebrew idiom, he who doesn't take up this cross, his cross, he who does not live by the Torah, that's the cross, and follow after Mashiach, is not worthy of Mashiach. What is the point of all of this? Well, separation comes to those who put something other than God in the highest place of honor in their lives. Why are they not worthy? Because they put something else before him. They put their love of family, of job, hunting, fishing, money, sleep, hobbies. When you put those things before God, then Mashiach has to come in and separate you with a sword. They put abuses, hurts, disappointments, failures, depressions, anxieties, fears, the worries about what their family's going to think about before God. And that sword has to come down and separate you from that. Where do you fall in the scheme of things? Are you stuck in a situation that comes between you and your relationship with God? Do you let what other people think about you come between you and your relationship with God? Do you let the way someone treats you and the things they say to you come between you and your relationship with God? I mean, is it more important that you look good to your family or that you keep your family relationships in pristine shape? Is that more important than your relationship with God? Because if so, the sword's coming down on you. Because when you ask God, when you agree to take on the yoke of Torah, that sword's going to come down. And it's going to separate you, and you're not going to have peace. But when it does, and you follow after Mashiach and prove, that you're worthy of him by doing so, then what do you get? Peace. Real peace. The peace that passes all understanding peace. Not just the temporary here and there, genuine imitation peace. that you get by holding up to the status quo, if you will. Will you ever measure up? Will you ever please him? Well, raise your hands and say to God, swing away, Lord. Use your sword to cut away everything that comes between us. Because when you do, you will measure up. You will please him. Shalom, be shalom.